Good morning. Here we are at Temple Baptist Church. We are moving on in the book of Jeremiah. It's been a trip. This is our third lesson in this, and my third lesson in this. And so, anyway, it's hard to begin this without talking about some background in here. The king of Judah, Josiah, he's the last king. We've been all over this before in class, but yet Josiah was the last good king of Judah, the southern kingdom. He took the reins when he was 8 years old, and about in just a little while he began to see what was wrong in Judah and how far down they had gone away, or how far away they had gone from the Lord, and he had a humble heart. God even said he had a humble heart, and because of that, he allowed him to die a peace. Well, it wasn't a peaceful death, but he was buried with his fathers there in Jerusalem, and so we see there's a lot of things that went on in his reign. He reigned for 31 years. He was probably in our Bible lesson today, he was probably somewhere between 30 and 40 when Jeremiah came and made this prophecy. He had, in our lesson last week, we seen where God had told Jeremiah to go prophesy in the gates of the temple, to stand there and to talk. That's in chapter 7. And so anyhow, he was told to do that, and he did that, and things was really beginning to go, in spite of Josiah's reforms, in spite of his tearing down the pagan temples and doing all of that stuff that he was doing his best to restore Judah back to a monotheistic type of religion in worshiping Jehovah God, and that was his goal in doing everything he did. But he began, and he made a bad mistake in that there was a conflict going on between the Egyptians, what was left of Assyria, and the Babylonians, and there was Judah right in the middle of it, right? All the main north-south highways ran right through the middle of it, and anyway, Josiah went out against the Pharaoh Necho of Egypt, and he was killed in that battle. He was hit by an arrow, and that's a whole story in itself, but he came back and he died. And then as far as Judah went, it was downhill from there on, because that was the last of like I said, the good kings, and the ones that followed after him. The next one, there was a whole series of them, and every one was just another step down the hill, further away from God. So anyway, now we see Jeremiah. He's come back, and really where this lesson starts today is in chapter 12, but we need to back up into chapter 11 to get some hint of what's going on here, because Jeremiah is getting, the pressure is beginning to get to him of this constant gloom and doom type of prophecy, and he is really he's really feeling it. And he was from, remember we said back in the very beginning in chapter 1 that he was from this little village called Anaboth that was about 2.5, 3 miles away from Jerusalem, and kind of north and a little bit east up there, maybe even a little bit west, just north there. But anyway, less than 3 miles away, and that was his hometown. His father, was a priest there, and in the religious workings of that little village there, and so anyway, you see Jeremiah is preaching this thing. It's basically the same thing all through the Old Testament: repent or perish is what it's amounted to. And we'll see in this lesson where God said, okay, I've had enough of it. I'm not taking any more of it, and judgment is coming. And even at that, people weren't seeing it. The God's man was preaching the word and telling them what God had said, and they were listening to the wrong preacher, is what it amounted to in that day, or the wrong priest. And because they were saying Jerusalem was okay. They had God's promise that nothing was going to happen to Jerusalem, that it was, it was not God's promise, by the way. But Jerusalem was the apple of God's eye, and they took that to mean that nothing was ever going to bad was ever going to happen to Jerusalem. And all that was going on all around that, these enemies were ready to pounce upon them, and Jeremiah was warning them of that, and they would not hear this lesson. But these priests in Jeremiah's hometown, and they had got tired of Jeremiah's gloom and doom kind of preaching, and they had conjured up this scheme to kill him. And this is his own family we're talking about, and that they were mad at him to the point they were going to try to kill him. And so this is 6.5 or so minutes into this Sunday school lesson, and this is where the lesson starts. But it's so applicable to where we live today, and the situation, the state that our country is in today. And Jeremiah starts out there in chapter 12, verse 1. These first 13 verses is what we have to deal with here. But he says right off the bat, he comes to God, letting God know that he's coming to him as the lesser person. God is the greater and he is the lesser, with a humble heart. But he's got questions, and have you ever had questions for God? As things, this railroad track we call life, and we bounce along down this thing, and we see the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer, and bad things are happening to good people, and all these things are going on, and it's just life. It's the life we live, but and we're all in the same boat, and the same boat. And so Jeremiah he's got this pressure coming at him from all directions, and people threatening to take his life, and Josiah the king has done the very best he could do towards restoring the right kind of worship to God, and so here we are. And he says there in the first couple of phrases there in chapter 12, verse 1, he says, "Righteous art thou, O Lord, when I plead with thee, yet let me talk with thee of thy judgments. Wherefore doth the way of, or why doth the way of the wicked prosper? Why are all they happy that deal very treacherously?" And who of us have not made that same comment? Maybe it wasn't in the old King's English, but yet at the same time, who of us have not said that? Even sometimes, in a sense, as Jeremiah has made this comment with the heart feel that God, you are God and you are in charge. But why is all this happening? It's not that he's really putting God on the spot so much as he said, I just need to understand why all this is happening. He's not saying he's going to quit or anything like that. He's just saying, I just want to understand why this is happening. And we've just all, I don't know, show my age a little bit, but there used to be a show on TV that was a $64,000 question or something way back in the early 60s, late 50s maybe. and they ask you these series of questions for the money, but that's kind of the $64,000 question right here. Why, God, does it seem like that these bad people that are always doing bad things, that they're the ones that are getting your blessings? I mean, that's really where we put the rubber on the road, and that's why I say, why are they blessed when those of us that are maybe me, why are they blessed and I am under so much prosecution, and he's losing sight of the fact that God told him that it was coming, that it was going to be this way, and so anyway, he said, why are they happy? That brings up, this is a Sunday school class, so I'm just going to bring it up there. Why do they seem like they're happy? Well, got to define happiness a little bit. I mean, you can go out there and be a party animal and do all that and think you're having a really great time till the next morning. You have to start rubbing your head and start asking yourself, why did I do all that stupid stuff yesterday? And most people don't want to answer that. They just want to recycle and do it over and over again. So anyway, to move on with this, it said, thou hast planted them. That yes, they've taken root. This is talking about Judah, the people of Judah. They grow. Yes, they bring forth fruit. But what kind of fruit? What kind of fruit are they bearing? And it's not good fruit. It's not good fruit at all. And he says, thou art near in their mouth and far from their reins, or far from their heart, or they're talking a good story. They're going to church. You see these people in church every day. But yet at the same time, when they leave church, they just revert back to this the old lifestyle. And it ought not be so. These things ought not be so. And he says, but this is the way it is. This is what I'm seeing Jeremiah telling God in this conversation that they're having. He's telling God, he said, they're talking a good story, but their lifestyle's not matching it. And he said, but thou, O Lord, knowest me. Thou hast seen me and hast tried mine heart toward thee. And then his humanity shows up on his next verse, because actually you see these. I have seen these T-shirts around. It says, "Kill them all, let God sort them out." Well, that's not a Christian viewpoint, but yet at the same time, in a sense, that's what Jeremiah is saying here in the last part of verse 3. He's in this conversation with God. He's saying, pull them out of the sheepfold like sheep for the slaughter, and prepare them for the day of slaughter. He's being a whole lot judgmental here. He's wavering against the pressure that's going on. And then he goes on here in verse 4. He said, how long shall the land mourn, and the herbs of every field wither, for the wickedness of them that dwell therein? And the beasts are consumed, and the birds, because they said, he shall not see our last end. I have noticed, and having my nose in this book for so many years, and seeing the warnings of God's judgment, that many times when God begins to judge a people or a country, a nation, he does that. He will begin with nature. He will begin with the forces of nature, and he'll make things go bad for people. And you can, even here in southeast Missouri, you can go outside right now and look, and there's smoke in the air from forest fires in Canada. There's on the west coast, there's fires and earthquake and all types of destruction. And you go to the east coast and there's floods and all that. And even today in south of us in Texas and in Arkansas, Texas, and Mississippi, they've got severe thunderstorm warnings out and all across the nation. Here in the Midwest, here in southeast Missouri, we're we're in a drought status. And so we see that, and can nobody take a minute and step back and look around and say, is this not God's judgment on us for the things that we do? We go to church every day. We've got all this turmoil going on in our nation today about things that are in no way godly, no way are there for years. This sin of abortion and murdering these babies, and this is all part of this lesson today. Actually, when you run to it, when you go with it, it says there. Then, besides the abuse of the land that has brought God's judgment upon it, I believe you don't have to. We're not going to have a falling out if you don't think that. Except this is what I see in the Word of God, and I see this happening. But he goes on. Then God speaks. Jeremiah has mentioned here, and these 3 or 4 verses here. But in verse 5, God begins to speak, and he said, if thou hast run with the footmen, and they have worried thee, then how canst thou contend with horses? And if in the land of peace wherein thou trusted they wearied thee, then how wilt thou do when the floods come on the Jordan River? And these things. And so he's telling Jeremiah here, things may have been bad, and they may have seemed bad to you, but they're going to get a lot worse. And you need to kind of buckle up a little bit and toughen up a little bit, because it's going to get rough. And what's that old cliche? They say to be forewarned is to be forearmed, to be ready for that. He said, but then God says, for even thy brethren and the house of thy father, even they have dealt treacherously with thee. We talked about that a little bit earlier. They have called a multitude after thee, and believe them not, though they speak fair words unto thee. They're telling him, Jeremiah, if you just lighten up a little bit, just kind of soften your message and not be so harsh with everybody, that maybe things would go a lot better for you. And he said, God's telling them, and it's kind of interesting, and I'm no language scholar by any means. Y'all figured that out a long time ago, but you see in verse 6, where he says, for even thy brethren and the house of thy father, even they have dealt treacherously with thee, and there's a semicolon there. And so he's going to say something about that. Yes, they have called a multitude after thee. And then there's a colon there, and then God's going to inject this other thought into this verse here when he says, don't believe them. They're talking to you, and they're talking like they're your buddies and all this. If you just lighten up a little bit, and we can just all live together, and everything's going to be okay. And God's just telling Jeremiah right off the bat, don't believe that garbage, because it's just not so. It's not going to be that way. And then God begins to tell him there in verse 7, and this is a sad verse there in verse 7. He said, I have forsaken mine house. I have left mine heritage. I have given the dearly beloved of my soul. And he's talking about Israel there, where he talked about, I have forsaken mine house. I have left mine heritage and given the dearly beloved, speaking of Israel, of my soul into the hand of her enemies. And this is, you might think of like a father and with his children, and they have, a father or mother, they love their kids and they do anything in the world for them, but things have gone so bad, he said, okay, I'm going to give them up, and they're, okay, it's time to take your licks and get your whipping or your discipline, whatever words you want to use there. He said, mine heritage, they're like a lion in the forest, and it cries out against me, therefore have I hated it. And the background on all that is such that the priest, the pastors, in fact, he uses that word in verse 10. The pastors, many pastors have destroyed my vineyard. They have trodden my portion underfoot. They have made my pleasant portion a desolate wilderness. Look at that in the next few verses at the words he uses there. The word desolate. He uses that in verse 10, in verse 11, three times in verse 11 he uses that same word desolate. And that last time that he uses it, the whole land is made desolate. That's kind of a two words in one there, but it means utter desolation. And actually you could see later on in the scripture, if we were just taking the Bible as a whole and going through it, we could see where people would come through the land of Israel, and they'd look and say, well, why did their God do this to them, to leave this in such a bad thing? I think about the news reports of seeing these people over in the Ukraine and what the Russians are doing to them, and that's what they're doing. They're utter desolation, just burnt earth type of warfare, and that's what they're doing. But he's saying there in verse 10, even the pastors, the word there, pastors, in that place, Jeremiah used this word 8 times in 7 verses in this chapter, but the word here is kind of synonymous with kings, and he's saying they've destroyed my vineyard. They've not provided the proper type of leadership that they should have had to have made this, to have led my people in the way that they should go. And people, when they're not led right, they go wrong. And that's just, that's a sad comment, but it happens a whole lot. And anyway, to go on with these, because we're about out of time, it says, the spoilers are come upon all high places through the wilderness, for the sword of the Lord shall devour from one end of the land even to the other, and no flesh shall have peace. These armies, they've got these Egyptians that come up from the south. They've got the remnants of a weakened Assyria coming down from the north. They've got the Babylonians that are increasing in power, and they're coming in from the north. And it says they have come upon the high places, and what this is talking about is the roads, the trails and paths that people have walked in there, because they didn't have 4-lane highways like we do here, and they are using these main roads to converge upon Jerusalem, and it really will get bad later on. We'll see that as we go on through it here. He said, they have sown wheat, but they shall reap thorns. They have put themselves to pain, but what shall it not profit? They shall be ashamed of their revenues because of the fierce anger of the Lord. And so, payday's coming. It's thus saith the Lord. This is the Lord's declaration that payday is coming. He told them in verse 1, look to the north, and you'll see it. It's like a boiling pot. And it's there. It's going to be in front of you in no time. Hey, come back and see us again, and we'll try to be a little more encouraging in the next taping session. We appreciate you guys. Appreciate the comments and the all the whole thing, the viewership of all this. A lot of work goes into these, and not just from my part, but a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff. And so we appreciate it, and we thank you for it. Come and see us at Temple Baptist Church. Love you guys.